So let's talk about the accuracy sensation style, or the ISTP in the Myers-Briggs system. This type is often called the technician. But before we really launch into this webinar, I just want to make a note about who I'm talking to, because I'm actually talking to three different styles of people. First, I'm talking directly to people that are the accuracy sensation type. I'm talking to ISTPs. I'm also talking to people who are friends and family members of ISTPs and maybe want to get to know this type a little bit better for the personal relationship. And then the third person I'm talking to is someone who wants to get to know all of the different personality types and is familiarizing themselves with all of the different types in a little bit more depth. So if I come in and out of pronouns, if I say you, they, we, whatever, that's normal because I'm talking to a whole group of people. But I'm primarily directing this webinar to people who are ISTP. So I'm mostly going to be talking directly to you, the accuracy sensation person. All right, let's get right into it. As an overview of all the types, ISTPs are the most talented at rapid, logic-based action. That makes them extremely talented mechanics. Their understanding of the world is intrinsically linked to their interaction with it, and this makes them very good at hands-on tinkering. And the more tinkering they do with their environment, the more mastery they have over it. They're natural kinesthetic learners, and they oftentimes become our most talented athletes, musicians, and mechanists of all types. So a lot of people who go to the Olympics are pretty much ISTPs. They're accuracy sensation people. Most of our best musicians, especially the precision musicians, are people of this type. And mechanics all over are known to be accuracy sensation people. They're ISTPs. This type is also independent. They're very self-directed, and it's unusual to see an accuracy sensation type allow themselves to be controlled or pushed around in any sense. If you're of this type, you know exactly what I'm talking about. However, they're also some of the more social introverts and will seek out relationships to help keep themselves grounded and understand their place in the world. So because they're so independent, they kind of have this little bit of this anarchist streak inside of them. They end up creating very interesting and deep relationships with other people to keep themselves grounded. So who's in the car? Now, this webinar should be a companion piece with the PDF profile that you got about this type. So go ahead and grab that. If you haven't read over it, go ahead and grab it. But what we're going to do is we're going to go over the car model that you read about in your profile. And we're going to break that down just a little bit. So there's 4 different positions inside your mind. There's 4 different mental processes that are occupying space inside your personality. The driver process, or your flow state, is accuracy. This is technically called introverted thinking. As a companion to it, what balances you out is your co-pilot or navigator process of sensation, and this is technically called extroverted sensing. The exact opposite of sensation is your 10-year-old. So if sensation is extroverted sensing, its exact opposite is introverted intuition, or what's called the perspectives process. And then directly behind your driver is the 3-year-old process of extroverted feeling, or what's known as harmony. Now, remember, your driver is your flow state. We're going to talk about that first. And so this is the way that you regenerate. This is how you juice your batteries. And for people of your type, the way it looks like as a driver process is that you have a natural interest in spatial logic as it applies to the real world. So you actually are extremely good at determining how things fit together in the real world. You're very good at machines. You're very good at managing physical data, better than just about anybody else. But this is also very much a focus on congruity and consistency in yourself and other people. I've heard people of your type or similar types say that they're human lie detectors. They can always tell when somebody's being inconsistent with themselves or incongruent with themselves. When you are using this talent well, you're applying this to yourself, and that means you can always watch when you're lying, right? Not to other people, but also to yourself. That's what it gives you. It gives you a natural aptitude for information, data, understanding physical data around you like machines, and also knowing the data that's inside you, whether or not it's consistent. So when you're lying to yourself and when other people are lying. You need a co-pilot process or a navigator to balance yourself out because your driver's introverted. So you need, and that means that you're going inside yourself, you're reaching the inner world, but you also need a way to interact with the outer world. You need to be able to get feedback. And your thinking process is also how you're making decisions. So you need a process that also takes in new information. And you do this with the process of sensation. Now, sensation is all about taking in information immediately in the real world, right? You're using all your senses to understand what's going on here and now. So because it's such a fast, in-the-moment processing system, people of your type have the tendency to live in the now. That's what's important, what's going on right here, right now. And you have a talent for real-world physics. Now, remember, accuracy gives you a talent for spatial logic, and sensation gives you a talent for real-world physics. So if you put those two things together, that's where you get somebody who is a master at machines, including your own body as a machine. And this is why people of your type become so good at athletics if you choose to. And sensation also keeps you realistic and observant. So you're looking at what's going on without any judgment when you're using sensation. You're not saying, oh, well, this should be happening. You're actually just taking in what actually is happening. And when you combine these two together, this is when you are a superhero of your type. When you're making sure you're using both accuracy and sensation together, this makes you exceptionally good at, again, being a machinist of all styles, thinking of instruments as a machine, thinking of cars or, machines as machines, and also your body. If you're doing sensation right, you also get really good at reading body language. And when you attach the focus on consistency or the ability to see when somebody's lying, along with sensation, the ability to read body language, now you become a human lie detector test. So this is when you're doing things well. This is when you are really a balanced person. But let's look at the backseat of the car. What happens when you're not as balanced? Well, it can happen with people of your type that when they don't want to see a piece of information in the outside world, right? They want to kind of defend themselves against information the quote unquote universe is giving them. They will become defensive, right? Not just in an argument, but actually with any information the world is telling them. So what will happen oftentimes is people of your type turn off sensation, because sensation is what is giving you information from the outside world. And instead of using that to understand what's going on, you'll skip sensation and go straight to your 10-year-old of perspectives, because perspectives is another introverted process. So you'll skip sensation, which is your co-pilot, and go straight to your 10-year-old, which is why we call the 10-year-old the defensive position. And this is how it looks. You might end up attributing bad motives to other people. And the reason for this is perspectives is about getting inside other people's minds. But you're not actually getting in their mind. You're more trying to support something you already feel. So if accuracy has a negative criticism about another person and you don't want to see what's actually happening with sensation, sometimes you will attribute bad motives because it supports something that you have already decided is true. Another thing that perspectives can do is create a fear of the unfamiliar inside a person of this type. Now, perspectives not only gets inside other people's minds, but it also looks into the future and kind of asks, sort of these questions of what could be, right? How could things be different than actually what we perceive? It's about sort of questioning reality in and of itself. Well, if you have this as a defensive position, it actually might make you a little paranoid and fear things that you aren't familiar with. But on a positive side, perspectives enjoy speculating on what's going on for other people. And if you're using it right, you can actually be good at it. So if you're not just using it to be paranoid about other people's motives or paranoid about the future, if you're using sensation well, right, the co-pilot, if you have a decision you've made in accuracy and you use sensation to actually ask what's truly going on, so you're grounded and rooted in reality, and you're really reading body language and you're really asking without judgment what's going on, then when you add the ability to kind of get inside somebody else's head, now you can be very good at knowing what's going on for other people. And you can get really good at it, but you can't substitute the 10-year-old for the co-pilot. You can't use perspectives instead of sensation. You can only use it after you've already mastered sensation. And this is actually how you create some intimacy too. The 10-year-old is where we play, and it's also how we create intimacy with other people. So when you really bond yourself with another human being, like in a mating situation, you can get pretty good at getting inside their heads, maybe getting them the perfect gift or something to that effect, where you really know the other person intimately. Okay, let's look at the 3-year-old. Now, the 3-year-old is the exact opposite of the driver. And because it's the exact opposite of the driver, it's the least developed of all 4 of these processes, and it can be called your blind spot. So your blind spot is extroverted feeling. Now, when people have this as a talent, it's when it's either the driver or co-pilot, they get really good at understanding social contracts. They get really good at reading other people's emotions. It's very much about meeting other people's needs. It's very much about other people's emotional needs. But because that's not something that you are into at all, what can happen for you is when you get overtaxed, really stressed out, like you've hit a wall and you don't even recognize yourself anymore, your brain knows that it's the accuracy process that actually needs a break, because we experience most of the life, all of us experience most of our lives through our driver process. So you're experiencing life through accuracy. And when you can't solve a problem using this process, your brain, it's almost like you've put, your foot on the gas and but you're not going anywhere, right? It's neutral and you've overheated the engine. Now, your brain knows if it goes to your 3-year-old, it will actually give the accuracy process some time off, right? It'll give it a little bit of a break, because these are 2 diametrically opposed processes. So when one goes on, the other one shuts off, and vice versa. Now, it's a little more complex in that it's more of a gradient than a toggle, but that's, simply put, that's how it works. So when you are overtaxing your accuracy process, or when a problem is, your brain will shut that off and go to harmony. But because it's a 3-year-old and you're already stressed out, this can look like tantrums, emotional, uncharacteristic displays of stress. Now, most of the people who are accuracy drivers kind of get a bashful look on their face when I say this, because they know when they've hit a wall, they go into a temper tantrum. It's almost like the emotion happens and they can't stop it. Sometimes they start crying, sometimes they just freak out, but that's what's actually going on, is that your mind is trying to give accuracy a break. So the mechanism is good, but if it's controlling you, that can look bad. However, if you control the mechanism, what it can actually do, actually, I'm not ready for that next piece. What it can do for you if you're controlling the mechanism is that you can go to a place where you're actually connecting emotionally with another person, or just getting your emotions out, like in a very healthy way, right? Like if you need to cry it out, right? If you need to spend some time connecting with your mate, connect with your mate. That's okay. Just try to prevent yourself from throwing the tantrum. Now, another thing Harmony can do as a 3-year-old is it can be thoughtless of other people's feelings. This is your blind spot. Other people's emotions aren't on your radar. So you can be kind of thoughtless and tactless when it comes to other people's emotions. However, as an aspiration, now what does that mean? Well, an aspiration is sort of a big game, inspired goal. And we find our aspirations in our 3-year-olds a lot, because this is a problem we can't really solve, or there's a problem we can't solve because it would be a problem the 3-year-old process would normally be in charge of solving. But because it's a 3-year-old, it's not very good at it. So what ends up happening is we find other ways of solving the problem, and we keep looking for ways of solving it for ourselves and other people. So one of the ways that people of your type as ISTPs use harmony as their aspiration is that they understand the importance of a good reputation. So this will be a self-defined good reputation, so it will be contingent on what you think is important. But basically it becomes important for people of this type to have a good reputation, and they become very sensitive to people's reputations in general. So that's the good part of it. But just remember that harmony can trip you up, but it can also be something that you can go to sort of de-stress And one of the best ways to do it, because it's extroverted feeling, is to really connect with somebody who you're close to on a deeply emotional level when you're feeling stressed. Just go cuddle or whatever it is you need to do, but don't throw the temper tantrum. All right, let's talk about this type in relationships. So the way that you as an ISTP connects is you generally do it based on a shared worldview and similar ways of thinking, because your worldview makes sense to you, right? Accuracy is all about what makes sense, really. When you trim away everything else, it's really about what makes logical sense. And so you oftentimes connect with other people based on what makes sense to you. And when somebody else shares that same sentiment, that's kind of refreshing. So oftentimes in relationships, you'll connect with somebody who brings that refreshing outlook. Now, because it's very important for you to have autonomy, you're very accepting of other people's autonomy as well. You basically feel that everyone should be able to direct themselves without scrutiny. And the more healthy an ISTP is, the more they feel this way. The more they feel that we really shouldn't be directing other people's lives, that we really shouldn't be imposing our our, ethics on other people. People should be basically free to live their lives. It's only when people of this type get very attached to basically how they were raised, or maybe when they get kind of paranoid about what's going on for other people, that's the only time they sort of think that they should be in charge of other people's destinies. But even not really so much then. There really is a strong autonomous streak in people of this type. And that's great, because they really understand what it means to be independent. Of course, because Harmony is their 3-year-old, they might be unintentionally insensitive and have a difficult time expressing how they really feel to other people. So for those of you that are of this type, one of the highest leverage ways to get over this is by using your natural talent of accuracy to be totally transparent and honest with those you love, even if it's awkward or embarrassing at first. So if you have trouble expressing how you feel, what you're really good at is telling the truth no matter what, right? Like, you're the person who ends up hurting people's feelings and you're like not sure how because you just told the truth. Well, do this when it comes to your own emotions as well. When you really strongly love somebody, make sure you're using the same honesty that you used when you told them, their haircut didn't look good this time. Use that same honesty to say, yeah, I love you and you're deeply important to me. One of the things that people of this type can have happen is that you might have a tendency to see things that confirm your beliefs and worldview. So try to see the world, try to use the sensation process, your navigator. Use that process to see the world objectively without judgment. So take in the full picture, see what's actually happening, not what you want to be happening, even if it ends up contradicting your belief. All right. So I know you're probably going to be attached to some of the things that make sense to you, but use that sensation process to get a big picture and actually be as realistic as possible. And that means, before I get on to the next piece, we're talking about in relationships. I just want to say there's times when people of your type can be paranoid about their spouses. I've seen over and over situations where people of your type can think your mate is cheating on you and have no idea why you think that. Make sure you're not using perspectives to confirm this. Make sure you're using sensation to actually take in what's happening and what you can confirm through your senses. Not what you suspect, not what you fear, but what actually can be confirmed. And do it without judgment. Don't assume you're going to find evidence. Don't look for evidence. Just open yourselves up to the world and open yourself up to a possibility that you could be right or wrong, right? Don't make a judgment initially. And don't assume ill intent of your mate just because you're starting to get paranoid. Now, there is a tendency in a relationship for people of this type to want to be the hero. Old ISTP movies are almost always the gunslinger, right? The old Clint Eastwood movies, the old John Wayne movies. These are all ISTPs. And we have a tendency as a culture to see people of this type as heroes, right? Like the lone wolf hero. And people of this type kind of like that role. So remember that you're not the hero in the relationship. And remember that you don't have to have excitement all the time in order to stay in the relationship. But if that's something that you're craving, make sure you tell your mate and make sure that you're creating excitement together. Otherwise, you might find yourself getting a little distant. And this might be something that you don't really register as a need of yours. It sort of sneaks up on you. Like you're like, oh, life is boring. How did that happen? Make sure you articulate this to your mate. Otherwise, you might find maybe, I don't know, your eye wandering. And this tends to be something that people of your type grapple with. So the best thing to do, once again, is radical honesty. Be as honest as possible. All right, let's talk about this type in business. So people of this type naturally gravitate to careers that allow for lots of, are we surprised? Mechanical expression and physical prowess, right? Because they're so good at it. They're so good at physics. They're so good at logistics. So they have a tendency to gravitate towards things that allow them to express themselves, express their physical prowess, use a lot of tools, use a lot of machines, and basically, thrive at what they're naturally good at. This type usually hates a desk job, and they'll need to be hands-on and using that amazing talent for spatial logic. So dangerous jobs are usually appealing. I know a lot of people of this type that are a policeman, that are firefighters, that have, jobs that other people would go, ooh, that's not safe enough. They usually like those jobs. So go ahead and use your natural talents and apply them to those jobs that maybe other people overlook because they're a little too dangerous. You like the excitement, and you're usually pretty darn good at it. People of this type are usually more useful in an improvisational role than as administrators. So you're not a good manager, but you're a great firefighter, as we mentioned. And you kind of have a chart the course interactive style. So for people of your type, you kind of figure out how we should be going about things. Once you know what we're doing, you're pretty good at kind of creating a plan for how we're going to do it. But that means you're best paired with somebody who is in charge and makes that final decision on what's going to be done. So the best power pair for an ISTP is an ESTJ, or an effectiveness memory person. Those two types usually get along really well in business. This type is practical and detail-oriented, but they may have some trouble seeing into the future and in planning long-term. So you might be a good chart the course and kind of figure out, how certain things are going to go or going to be implemented, but you might have trouble with really long-term strategy or goals, 5-10 years down the line. So if that's the case, find somebody to fill this role. It's okay that you're not great at it. You're a firefighter. You're a machinist. You've got all sorts of talents. Find somebody else to fill the role of the long-term planning. And as you know, you might have difficulty with anything that's social, as well as taking orders. Now, there are some contexts in which you're good at it. If you really respect your boss or manager or supervisor, if you think they're really smart, you're okay taking orders from them. If you think they're an idiot, it is almost impossible to take orders from them because you're a make sense kind of person. And if they're not making sense, then you're gone. So if you have like a receptionist role, which of course would make you want to blow your brains out, so never become a receptionist, or if you're working for somebody that you think is an idiot, this is a problem for you. You won't be able to last there for very long. And as somebody who might be employing an ISTP, remember, don't put them in situations where they need to be overly social. Don't put them in situations where, they might have a lot of bosses above them, because one of them is bound to not be, maybe even as smart as them sometimes. So make sure that they have a measure of autonomy. Again, if they use that perspectives process, which they have a tendency to do when they're unhappy or defensive, they might become paranoid that they're being controlled and try to resist it. So if you've got an ISTP under too much management, they'll start to resist because they think that you're trying to control them. And for the ISTPs out there, remember that the antidote to this, that you're being controlled and people are trying to control you, is that fundamentally all these choices are yours. You can stay and work with the team, or you can leave, right? That's ultimately your choice. Remember that you have what's called an internal locus of control. Internal locus means that you are creating your reality. You are the person who's making the choices to be there. Even if you're like, well, but I don't feel like I can make these choices because I've got a family at home and I've got to have a job. That's true, but you can still walk at any time. So if you're working with a team, remember that power is inside of you. And I'm not saying that means you have to walk off, but what I'm saying is that nobody's trying to control you and nobody fundamentally can control you. Ultimately, you're the person who's in charge of your destiny. So don't get paranoid. Don't feel like you have no options. There's always options. And remember that you are fundamentally controlling your life. So let's talk about a few best practices for ISTPs. So important. Exercise the sensation process. Make sure you are becoming the most balanced person you can be by exercising that navigator or co-pilot process in order to objectively take in information that might conflict with your beliefs, worldview, or identity to avoid continual confirmation bias. Okay, what does that mean? That means use sensation to see how the world actually is, not how you want it to be. It's so important. If you are only seeing evidence that supports what you already believe, you are not being realistic and you are not making sense. All right, that does not make sense to only see things that verify what you already want to believe. Take in as much information of what is actually going on in the world as you can. And also exercise sensation to see opportunities you might miss if you're too focused on your personal experience. So sensation, using it well, will also give you a wide range of opportunities that you otherwise might not be seeing because you're too into yourself. Don't walk away when things become uncomfortable. Stick with it and find excellence. What does that mean? That means that you can fundamentally walk away if you need to, if something's unhealthy for you, but don't just jump ship at the first sign of trouble. Just because things aren't super comfortable, that doesn't mean that you have to flee. If you stick with something, that's when you become exceptional at it. And that's how people of your type become, people who go to the Olympics, right? Because they've stuck with it, even if it was tough. And remember that happiness for people of your type, happiness for accurate sensation people, is often related to their ability to have a successful love relationship and to their mastery of a skill. Okay, so those are two different things. Your happiness is usually based on having a good love relationship and then also on your ability to master a skill. So persevere and find people who understand you. So find somebody who gets you, find somebody who gets that you are going to be focused on mastering something, whether that's an instrument, whether that's wood crafting, whether that's, something that's an, athletic ability, whether that's cooking, whatever it is that's your skill, you have to master that skill. And then you got to find somebody who will not see that as the mistress. All right. And also find somebody who understands your need to be a loner. All right. Recognize that there are people out there who very much are looking for your type, because they're just madly in love with people like you. So have the most successful love relationship you can and make sure you're mastering a skill. And that's usually the two things that people of your type need in order to have a truly happy life. Thank you so much for joining me at the Accuracy Sensation webinar. For those of you who are of this type, I just want to make a note. We can't go on without you, all right? Your type is incredibly important in this world. You're the ones who show us what is possible when it comes to our bodies. You're the ones who push the limits and won't take any, limitations other people give you. And so you show us what's really possible in a lot of different contexts. You're the people who keep our machines going as well. So thank you so much for being you, and make sure you're bringing your gift to the world, because truly we can't survive without it.